Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Drew Clark. I am the editor and publisher of Broadband Breakfast. Very happy to welcome you to this Broadband Breakfast Live Online for Wednesday, August 4th, 2021. And this is a little bit unusual in that I will be a panelist, but not the host or the moderator of your session today. That will be by Sean Buckley, who is the editor of Broadband Communities. I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over to you, Sean, for introductions and to get us started.
Great, thanks, Drew. Hello and welcome to the preview of the Broadband Communities Summit Part 2. Just so everybody knows, the Broadband Communities Summit is the leading event for broadband operators. Summit attracts system operators, network builders, and deployers of all kinds. And many of the country's major property owners, real estate developers also attend the summit each year, along with independent telcos, cable companies, municipal and state officials, community leaders, and economic development professionals. In the third part of this series, Broadband Breakfast and Broadband Communities will preview the next upcoming event. We're going to focus on financing panels at the event, both the Broadband Communities Summit main sessions, as well as the Digital Infrastructure Investment Mini Conference on September 27th. Finally, just so everybody knows that the third preview session, which will be held on August 18th, will address multi-tenant housing issues at the summit. And I will again be moderating, but without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists for today. Joining me, of course, is my colleague, Steve Ross, editor-at-large and founding editor of Broadband Communities. Brian Snyder, CEO of Lit Communities. Hilda Legg, Rural Economic Development Consultant for Legg Strategies. Of course, Drew Clark, editor and publisher of Broadband Breakfast. And I'm going to hand it over to Steve. Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sean. Everybody by now knows that COVID showed the worth of universal broadband and the need for it. And, it's really just like roads and courts and water supplies. You need broadband. But the devil is in the detail. Right now, private and public money for financing broadband deployments is cheap. And just as important, it's available. It really, in most parts of the country, is available. It's not just banks saying, well, if we had the money, we'd loan it to you at 2 or 3%. This is even before the feds may come in with an extra $50 billion or so on the pending infrastructure bill. And by the way, you've heard $65 billion, but actually about $15 billion or so, maybe a little more, is money that's already been authorized and appropriated and is being double counted. So if you're building something that costs $65 billion, you're probably out of luck. Many states and cities are also developing their own financial aid programs. Again, sometimes that's with a federal money, or sometimes it's a mixture of federal money and local money. But thus, there's really no surprise that easily half of this year's Broadband Summit, which is September 27th to 30th, is devoted to sessions covering financial issues. Now, readers of Broadband Communities magazine know that we're really not into platitudes. We like broadband. You should like broadband. Everyone should like broadband. That's a platitude. The summit is for actionable details. How do you shape your business plan? How do you apply for funds? How might you partner with other entities in your region? How do you sort out the messy little details like existing lien priorities and contingent liabilities? How do you model your cash flow and your capital spending? Now, there are entire individual sessions, not just a few scattered panelists, for electric co-ops, for local and state officials, for public deployers, for public-private partnerships, and more. How do you convince your bankers and your investors that today's business plans, which often feature mainly supplying broadband, not so much content, accelerate the cash flow, cut marketing costs, because the marketing is easier, your proposition to the customers are easier. It attracts blue chip anchor tenants like for cellular backhaul and more, all reducing lender risk and cutting CapEx by starting payback faster. How do you explain that? We'll tell you how. MDUs especially may be able to attract self-amortizing lease financing and save money that way if you're not capable of borrowing money, because the network you build itself is an asset that you can sell for 2 or 3 times what it costs you to build it. Now, my session on financial modeling closes the summit Thursday afternoon, and session attendees, if you're really willing to wait that long, get a free thumb drive with proven models, documentations, economic studies, and more. You can find it all in the magazine, but it's much more difficult. At least 2 former Rural Utilities Service administrators, Chad Roop and Hilda Legg, will be there all week and presenting as well. Bankers, Wall Streeters, community activists, consultants, vendors, they're all there. So come to the summit early, leave late. Monday, Drew Clark's Broadband Breakfast team runs a conference within a conference. There's a couple of other conferences and workshops going on at exactly the same time. So don't just come, bring a colleague or two. But Drew's conference, Digital Infrastructure Investment 2021, is really shaping up fantastically well. And he's going to tell you more about that later. And it unites the broadband infrastructure and financial services community to focus on the investment asset profile, which includes fiber, small cells, towers, local data centers. All that's required to support 21st century information economy. Hilda Legg, RUS administrator so long ago, and has been a consultant and worked for RUS the last few years as a state rep in Kentucky. Hilda hosts a track Wednesday and Thursday that includes 3 sessions. And mind you, Hilda's been on our board over the years when the government, when she was not working for the government, that's us. And she hosts Wednesday and Thursday sessions, 3 sessions in a track focused on getting and using federal funding programs, both potential ones and that are pending and others that already exist. Now, we're going to hear now from Hilda, who will then introduce Drew's team later. Hilda, the floor is yours, and I can't imagine anyone who deserves it more.
Unmute yourself, Hilda. Go ahead and unmute yourself first, please.
All right, got it. All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Thanks, Steve. It's always wonderful to be with you and the Broadband Communities Magazine's team, Sean and everyone. And Drew, how many years have we been doing this together? There's nothing I'd rather talk about than broadband and getting broadband to the deserving citizens of this great country of ours. So thank you very much for allowing us to be a part of this, of your webinar today. We're really grateful for our long-standing relationship with you, Drew. And really not since, as Steve mentioned, back in 2002 Farm Bill, when we got our first big chunk of billions of dollars to try to get out the door at USDA, I have not seen such recognition of the need to invest in these networks. If you would have told me this in 2005, when we're rolling out that money, I would not have believed you, and neither could we have even said things like fiber to the home at that time, because they would have written some negative article about it. And today you are seeing millions and millions of dollars. My old agency at USDA Rural Utilities Service, this year they've got over 35 million in Community Connect. They've got the 12 million in 2021 funds, the CARES Act still at 91 million. They've got the incoming infrastructure money, and it just goes on. Then you've got NTIA with their money, Treasury with their money. Lots more states are putting money into helping communities and companies build networks. And so the question becomes, how do we get those dollars invested into true broadband networks throughout the country and get those dollars to work on behalf of the American citizen? And the Broadband Communities Summit has several sessions that are dealing directly with financing networks. And just let me highlight a couple of them that are special to me. On Wednesday, the 29th, we have financing the ABCs of government funding. Now, we all know the federal government, any government, is notorious for details and rules and forms, and it's so intimidating and overwhelming to people who are sitting out in America saying, our community needs some of that money. And so we want to break that down, and leading that effort will be our own broadband hawk, Steve Ross, that you've just heard from, with all of his details and analysis and all of his expertise. But we will also be bringing in government officials, those who are actually working with the programs, to talk to you about those and what do they expect from an application. And then we're going to have the view from a insider DC consulting firm who's been securing funding for American companies or companies to deploy broadband throughout the country for decades. So that is one on breaking it down. You're being an old school teacher, the ABCs, you know, we have to go buy the book on those. Now, following that will be what we call a team of finance wizards. And they'll be talking about how local communities need to issue bonds or apply for grants and loans, or how to maximize your own community investment dollars and opportunities. Presenters will be the immediate asked administrator for USDA Rural Development, Mr. Chad Roop, who's also in the banking business. So that always helps when you're dealing with money. And then we also will have with us Heather Mills, a longtime expert in applying for federal dollars with CTC and hands-on in helping communities get to the point of application and moving it through the process. One of the challenges that local leaders have is helping their communities understand that it is a process. You can't just like go get that money. It's out there. Now, you know, Mr. Judge, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Governor, Mr. Whatever, go bring that money home. And then they want it immediately. And that's not the way that it works. So in order to help you understand that process and even how to communicate to your constituents is another thing that we'll be talking about in this financing, how to get the dollars and to do it right so that your competitive application will win. There are many more sessions on dealing with finances. There's one there's money for that. And then a known name in the industry, Heather Gold, is holding a session on utilities, helping other utilities, something I've long time been an advocate. And there'll be even case studies for that on her session. This just touches the surface, ladies and gentlemen, of the exciting lineup at the 2021 Broadband Communities Summit. We will be talking about that ever important and reoccurring discussion of mapping. We'll be talking about healthcare and education issues and how to bring people together in your community to support your effort at bringing dollars in to your communities and your counties and your states. You don't want to miss this, because not since 2002 Farm Bill put that first big chunk of change out there for building broadband networks have I seen this kind of excitement, this kind of interest, and this kind of resources that are available. The trick becomes, how do we get those resources invested and driving the economies of our communities that make up this country? Ladies and gentlemen, mark your calendars for September the 27th through the 30th and go online and register today. And for now, I'll turn it back over to Drew and his team.
Hilda, I've never met someone in government who sells as well and as consistently as you do. So it is always a pleasure to be on a call or an event. And of course, Hilda, we've worked extensively over the years, but before your latest, service in the government on this show. I'm going to say just a few words about digital infrastructure investment 2021, the framework for it. And then I'm going to turn it over to Brian Snyder, who's the Chief Executive Officer for Lit Communities and brings an exceptional range of experience from the past to what we are thinking of as the future and the future of digital infrastructure investment. So let me just spotlight myself for a quick moment. Digital infrastructure investment began last year, our first version of this conference. We did it. We obviously were ready to do it with Broadband Communities, but the pandemic had other plans. We went ahead and did it virtually and streamed it during the conference. We are very excited that this year it will be a hybrid event, both in person and remote. so that you will be able, we're promising, we aim to deliver on this, the same kind of experience for those who are not able to be in Houston as those who are. Now, of course, we want you to be in Houston. We very much want you to be, because of the in-person connection and because all of the other things that you will get by attending Broadband Communities Summit. But I just want to highlight for you in the few minutes I have before we turn back to Brian and then to Sean for our discussion, some of the things that we'll be speaking about at Digital Infrastructure Investment 2021. So part of the thinking here, and you can see the basic program on both the broadbandbreakfast.com/DII for digital infrastructure investment. That's the page that will continually be updated for the summit. And a preview of that is on the Broadband Communities at a glance page. But we basically have 4 core topics that we're going to be addressing in the summit, or I should say in the digital infrastructure investment. The first is infrastructure investment funds. The second is last mile digital infrastructure. The third is public-private partnerships and new energy behind that. And the fourth is the future of shared infrastructure. And I'll say just a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. In some ways, this kind of mirrors the capital stack that those who are seeking to build fiber networks, and this is why we're so pleased to be doing this at Broadband Communities, because Broadband Communities is the premier event for broadband infrastructure builders, those who don't just talk about it, but who actually do it, right? And so this first session will talk a lot about the debt financing, about the role that debt and equity play in your broadband builds. It will talk about the role that the infrastructure bill that's kind of still out there, but taking steps forward, how that will be factoring into your models and your financing equations. Our second topic about the last mile digital infrastructure. We're going to be addressing the way ownership models have evolved and will continue to evolve, right? I mean, I think it's fair to say Broadband Communities has been out front on this, that the notion that there's going to be a single provider that owns the network, that operates the network, that offers services on the network, that model is fading, if not history, right? And what we do see now is we see different players bringing their expertise to the ownership and the asset profile, to the operation of the network and the core network, to the services, right? And we're going to be speaking with service providers, the private sector entities that are operating on these networks and want to operate on new networks that are out there being constructed. The third topic, this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, right? And again, this is where local communities have a role. And increasingly, we're seeing that municipalities don't need to see a broadband network as an either or decision. Either I do it myself and take on all this expertise, or I basically write a blank check to one of the landline incumbents, right? It's not that way anymore. There's many opportunities for public-private partnerships where citizens and their government entities can play a very, very significant role in the negotiating process. Do they own? What do they own? Do they own this asset, that asset? Do they operate this, or do they have a private entity to operate? And even, again, the services. And finally, we just can't neglect what's going on around us with this 5G development, right? It's been a little overhyped 2 years ago, right? And we've done our part at Broadband Breakfast through various events, the No Nonsense Guide to 5G that we ran, where we really try to look at the reality for what is involved. And the reality of what's involved in 5G is more fiber. That's the plain and simple reality. We need more fiber deeper into the neighborhoods, to the towers, how those towers will be more shared through digital and distributed antenna systems, and also through shared infrastructure more generally. So that's kind of the outline I wanted to share with you about the topics we're going to be addressing and how financing is central to them as part of Digital Infrastructure 2021. With that, let me go ahead and turn it over to Brian Snyder of Lit Communities. Very excited for Lit Communities' involvement in the event. And Brian, go ahead, take it away, and then back to you, Sean.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. Always good to be on with you, and thanks to Broadband Communities Summit and Broadband Breakfast, and the event that's going to be happening, I think, is unique. Obviously, we're talking about the financial aspect on this call and previewing that concept, but even the part where obviously it's great to be there in person. You know, we were at Fiber Connect last week. It was awesome to have a conference in person. It was amazing, but also COVID taught us that we can still do some of these things virtually too. And I love the concept of the digital infrastructure investment piece of it being, you can attend it virtually as well. So even if you can't make it in person, you're still able to receive some context live while it's going on. And I think we're going to continue to see more and more of that as conferences evolve, which then we're able to touch so many more people across the country. And that's going to be great at this event. And we're really excited to be participating in it. Our company has been down the financial roller coaster, I guess to say. We started out really getting into the municipal space, and in every community that we worked with, 5-6 years ago, it was always financing that was the issue when it came down to it. And our goal and everything we worked towards was we have to create unique business models to make this work. And it takes a unbelievably big partnership to get it done. I don't care what anybody tells you, there's not one company that can go out there and do all of this. The largest companies in the world subcontract everything from that standpoint. And it's that same way if you're going to build out a municipal network. And one of the things that we always like to say is it's always feasible. When we go in and you evaluate a community, you're evaluating it from what does your community residents and business leaders, what do they want from their broadband network, and then building a unique business model from a standpoint of here's how we could potentially stack the capital the right way to get this done, and also look at monetizing fiber in a different way that is more open access, open application, to the point where we can bring telehealth, we can bring smart city applications onto the network. It turns into a bigger utility ecosystem that these financial models now can work. The great part about how the digital infrastructure investments laid out and what Drew just talked about in the order is really a piece of the capital stack we've been working on for years to try to accomplish. Now go talk to a debt financing person and say, hey, we're going to go build a brand new fiber network. And they're like, no, good luck. You need a bunch of 2 years of historic data on that. But I even think debt institutions are looking at this totally differently now than when we talked to them years ago. It's a different aspect from that scenario. And this is sad, but it also took kind of a pandemic for all of this to come together the right way to where we can accelerate faster than we've ever been in the past 5 years. Our business model was always from about 2020 to 2005, we knew there was going to be a ramp up in municipal broadband and rural areas getting built with fiber to the home more and more and more. But with what happened with the CARES Act project and now ARPA dollars and now the infrastructure bill and equity and new infrastructure equity groups getting involved in the piece, and then grant funding on top of that where new things are getting structured. You see the money that's coming out in what California recently announced, Virginia, those state dollars. Again, now we have the ability to actually stack this right, and we're setting ourselves up for success, but it is about doing it the right way. And again, I love the structure that this was laid out, where it goes from here are the different financial pieces from the public investment world, the debt investment world, how the private equity investment world looks at it, and then how you can tie it all together into a really good public-private partnership where everybody wins. And that's, to me, that's the goal of any partnership. If both partners succeed, then we've won. So I'm excited that this conference is going to go through the financial capabilities that we could actually bridge the digital divide. The money's been put out there over the course of the years to already do this, but now I think it's swinging to a point to where everything's set up. It's to a point where it has to happen, and it has to happen the right way. And I hope this education throughout this conference is going to help a lot of people out, help a lot of municipalities get connected, because at the end of the day, that's all we want to accomplish, whether we're involved, whether our company's involved with it or not. As long as people are connected, we're going to do a lot better things than what we're currently doing now. So thank you.
John, back to you.
Yeah, great. Well, a lot of great elements here. We could go on for another hour or two. I just want to just point something out that the Broadband Communities conference is going to be all live. It's just Drew's part is the hybrid. But anyway, I just want to pose this question to everybody. I mean, what do you all think is different this time? Brian just walked through a bunch of different entities that are interested in doing fiber investments. I mean, you got the equity groups. I mean, we saw from last night, Lumen selling off its assets. I mean, not that that's totally tied to this, but you see a lot of equity groups and other different entities trying to get involved in funding broadband. But, pose the question to all of you. I mean, what's, just talk to me a little bit of what's different this time versus, I don't know, 10 years ago, or, we've seen other funding things. And I don't know who wants to start, but that's kind of my first general question. You, Steve or Brian?
Sean, I think one of the things for somebody who's been trying to sell telemedicine and distance learning since the 90s, mid-90s, have been trying to promote it, build wide area networks, T1 lines, that kind of thing.
Oh, boy.
I tell everybody that I've been trying to promote distance learning telemedicine for 25 years.
Wow.
COVID did more in 6 months than I did in 25 years. It forced, and so I'm going to take this from the general population, constituents of elected officials, businesses, schools, educators. They were forced to begin to try to use the technology that we knew that was there to provide the service, medical schools, whatever. And when you started trying to talk about building fiber networks in rural, and I'm talking about rural communities in this country, it certainly wasn't financially feasible. You could, how much grant money would it take to do, blah, blah, blah. But all of a sudden, there was a need for those children to be online in those schools for months and maybe again. I think that experience that forced us to use the technology that was available. And while everybody had been talking and could talk about the importance and it can do this and it can save lives and whatever, it made people have to use telemedicine. It made people have to do distance learning. And we know the technology is there, and now it's and so I think the funding has finally risen. And I think the pressure that elected officials, business people are under now, working at home, and the federal government's still working at home. All of those things are driving the momentum. And I just say there's nobody that does a better job at bringing those forces together than Broadband Communities Magazine, because in the summit, we don't have a membership that we have to sort of think about that angle or anything. We are about the story. What is it that fiber can do for this country? If there's not a better place to come to get that total picture, unbiased, unvarnished. And so I just, again, encourage everybody to sign up for the summit. But that's my answer. I hate to give COVID too much credit, but.
No worries. Sounds good. Brian, how about you? I see you kind of queued up here.
Yeah, just to add a little bit to what Hilda said, I think a lot of the change over the past few years has been education too. It's jumped into the spotlight faster than we've ever seen it. And it's become political. So it also municipalities had to get caught up to speed more than anything. And, when we were looking at the issue, I guess 7-8 years ago, we always felt like co-ops were well positioned to go do this. They've built and they've run a utility. They make sense. The municipalities that were going to struggle in rural areas are the ones that don't know how to run a utility. And that's where we felt they needed the most support and wanted to bring that to them. But from a financing standpoint, we went through a roller coaster trying to raise equity on projects that were ruled, but we believed in our business model, and we talked to hundreds. And from that standpoint, though, there's so many different infrastructure funds right now that were probably, if you asked them 10 years ago, would you ever be in the fiber broadband space? They'd probably tell you no. And all of them are looking at it now. We've had so many conversations where it's just more asking about the business plan about fiber, to where they're getting better education, to where a year from now, they're preparing for that fund to be released into broadband. And we're going to continue to see that grow and grow and grow. So it's a combination of a couple things that have all come together. Again, the fast forward button got pushed with COVID. And so a lot of folks are seeing that from especially even the private equity side, and then how we can tie different things in with some of the public financing we're working in too. But folks that you wouldn't think would be looking at this are now all in. And I see, you'll see different, I think, investors in the game next year as well.
Yeah. Steve, you want to weigh in? I'm sure you do, but get on mute though.
For
Steve?
a moment.
Yeah,
Let me come in for a moment. It's not, first of all, there's a combination of things that have happened. You have much more money and it's available and it's cheap. And that's been now 8 or 9 years of low interest rates. And we're going to get at least another year or two out of that. We're not talking 10, 11%. The second thing is the technology lowers the risk for everyone. You have fiber, you can mix it with hybrid fiber coax, you can mix it with wireless. The software exists, the management tools exist. The beautiful thing is, if you're building totally new in an area that's never had broadband, and you can do 60, 70% of your customers with fiber fairly cheaply, the other 30% are going to eat you for lunch. You can temporarily do wireless because the sunk cost of doing the wireless is so low that as you bootstrap out and get to serve the rest of those customers better and better, you're not really eating up, you're not slashing away very expensive copper or any kind of other stuff. It's just much easier to do. And finally, because of so much over the top, things like Netflix and HBO and Paramount Plus and so forth and so on, you as a deployer have a much easier sales proposition. You're selling broadband. You're selling broadband to your customers. You're going to try to sell broadband to cellular providers who would rather not build it themselves. It's 3 big cellular providers. Now you get your cash faster and you can open in phases. The cellular folks look at it, there's things they have to do to make that possible. They've got to go to the FCC and change spectrum lease agreements, but they're going to be able to reuse spectrum. Communities are going to see one cell site on a telephone pole or with all the service providers providing and all the spectrum providing. So it's better for the community. And the financer then looks around, and it's a circle. The financer looks around and says, ooh, you're going to deploy, and your anchor tenants are AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. I've heard of them. And big regional players that are on both sides, like C Spire in Mississippi and the surrounding areas. And so you get a lower interest rate. You get more people looking at it. Finally, government has really wised up. And the FCC is a little bit a riddle inside an enigma. But I was on a seminar with RUS a couple of weeks ago, and they were showing their new form for applications. And it's gone from a 4-page form to a 2-page form. But what if you've applied in the past unsuccessfully and you've got a 4-page form and it took you a long time to fill out? So RUS says, oh, don't worry, give us a little time and we will help populate the new form from your old data and get it back to you. Huh?
efficiency.
Ronald Reagan used to say one of the great American lies is we're from the federal government and we're here to help you. Yeah, our U.S. has always taken that seriously, but it's very often had unbelievably good administrators. Hilda, Chad Roop recently. It's just extraordinary, and you shouldn't be afraid of taking advantage of it if you need some federal money or state money to get you over the edge. You don't have to go totally crazy. It's not easy, but it's not totally crazy. Hilda, you're there.
Let me make just two quick points, if I may, Sean.
Sure. Go ahead.
Jump in. So the first one is what's different, to your question of what's different now than 10 years ago or a few years ago. The first is a willingness to explore new business models, not just on the fiber and the broadband, but on the financing, right? I mean, it used to be basically there's two business models, private and government, right? I mean, those are the kind of two financial. Now, like there's a multiplicity within private, right? And there's a multiplicity within government even, right? I mean, like because we've, in fact, on a previous Broadband Breakfast Live Online, we've talked about all of the ways that infrastructure funding could go. Could it be a reverse auction through like a rural digital opportunity fund? Could it be block grants to the states? Could it be competitive grants for the federal government or state government? Could it be to municipalities, right? Get money to a municipality that then decides, do we want to build it ourselves or do we want to enter into public-private partnership? So there's so much more a willingness to entertain those business models. And the second point, I would be remiss if I didn't hammer this point home. We need more overbuilding. Okay, you heard me right. Let me repeat that. We need more overbuilding. It's used like a swear word in Washington. I just don't get it. Overbuilding is competition. That is what overbuilding is. And particularly when we're overbuilding low capacity 25/3 or even 25/25 or 125 networks, we need to overbuild those if we're going to get to the world where we have the kind of capacity we need. So there should, I mean, again, I know this is all sausage making in the details of government right now, but we definitely need to encourage more overbuilding with private and public funds, in my opinion. So anyway, back to you, Sean.
Yeah, great. Well, all three of you, all of you have mentioned this, the public-private partnership concept. I mean, we've been talking to other communities on our own, Westmoreland, New Hampshire, Camden, Maine. I mean, there's hundreds of examples, but what's everyone's take on that kind of concept? I mean, there's different ways to get it done. You know, we've seen lots of different models, but could that help sort of, you know, just get more broadband in the local communities where you got the local community telling you what they want versus someone in a ivory tower saying this is what you'll have and that's it. I mean, it seems like this local feel is kind of what I see with the public-private partnerships, but who wants to weigh in on that? You know, I don't know if Hilda or Brian, you know, I know all of you are very involved in those types of agreements. So yeah, we can take it away. Who wants to jump in? Brian?
I don't mind starting. I mean, our whole model is built off of public-private partnerships. To be honest with you, and the city and the community that we work with drives it. They drive the way we set up the business plan, the model, to where, you know, you work with one community and they just want to own a middle mile network and not be the provider and it be open access. And I think that's what a lot of communities you're going to see across the country. It's a really solid model that gives that community a base to protect their network connectivity and the community actually control that. But they also create a revenue stream and better access for private providers to come in and provide fiber to the home services, make it more feasible to get the cost down. But then you got other communities that want to be the ISP in areas. Now, some states, unfortunately, they can't in certain aspects, but that's not stopping you from creating a unique business model to get it done. It's not stopping you from being an open access network and owning the infrastructure. And at the conference, I think we're going to get into a lot more different of these models and have speakers that have done this. But I mean, our initial market in Medina County, Ohio is, again, I think a great definition of a public-private partnership that works. The economic development group in the county and Medina County Fiber Networks are the perfect public partner we would ever want. And it feels like they're more a part of our team, and we're all working together towards the same common goal. And then you can accomplish amazing things when you're doing that. And like, because of what they've done in the past and because of the partnership we've been able to create with them, started out in the county in two of the worst served areas, where we're not starting in where the density is at and expanding from there. We're starting where the worst connectivity is and then going the other way. And those are the folks that need it the most. And when you go to these areas, it's different than talking about it right now, but I would recommend municipalities go to some of the areas that we're going to talk about at the conference and visit them, because you're going to get a totally different feel when you're there with the way the residents speak, the way the mayor speak locally, than what you would do by us just telling a story. It really is. And the proof is in the pudding when it comes to that. So I think public-private partnerships and the way money is coming from different organizations, again, from ARPA to grants to the infrastructure bill that's going to be coming out too, we actually have a unique chance to bridge the digital divide through public-private partnerships.
Right. Hilda, I'll kick it over to you. I mean, you've been involved in so many funding elements over the various past administrations and everything. What's your take on the public?
Well, I think, I always kind of hit that human aspect. And before I go there, I want to tell Drew that I just want to amen his overbuild. And
oh, really? I'm so glad to hear that, Hilda. I'm going to take that to the bank.
I want you can drive because it's about the consumer. The consumer gets a better product when there's competition and people are competing for that customer. So in theory, I just think that's the way. I think it's a challenge, but I just wanted to amen it. I guess when we talk about the public-private partnerships, we've just heard that for those of us in rural economic development, that's, been around for a long, long, long time. It's always hard to achieve because it takes, it's like a marriage. It's a lot easier when you make your own decisions about where you live and when you turn the lights on, and et cetera, or turn the TV off or whatever, than it is when you get two people trying to share that life and joint decisions. So I think a lot of times our leadership in our communities, and particularly in our rural communities, have to start looking at that partnership a little bit differently. And a lot of times, and I don't know if this is just rural or not, but we really like to own something. We're really proud of it. It's ours and we built it. We might go out as a small town and build that network, but if we don't have a really good training for technicians and linemen and all the kinds of things that it takes, and have the leadership in place and the organization in place. And with governments, it makes it particularly difficult because that leadership changes and can change every 4 years. So public-private partnerships, I think, are a challenge. But I think if you can find the right leader who's willing to subjugate his or her control, and look at a long term and take the value of the private sector and figure out the way to make it work. And there are good examples of it. We just need to tell that story more, and you'll hear those and see those at the summit. So I think it's a challenge in many ways. From the human aspect, I think it's a challenge, and to get us to all give up our own control and work together. But I think it can be done, is being done, and you need to come and hear more about it at the summit.
So with regard to your question about public-private partnerships, Sean, I mean, my answer to that is open access, open access, open access, right? I mean, and the reason I say that is because public-private partnership is a very, porous term. It can mean anything from, a vertically integrated telecom company needs to go to the city to get permission to build their network, which then they will then own, run, and offer services on. Or it can mean the city wants to do it all, but maybe, they want to own, run, and operate, the network, but they are going to contract out some functions of it. But I think, again, what we will be talking about at the Digital Infrastructure Investment, and I know will be present at other parts of Broadband Communities Summit, is sometimes it takes a different specialization, i.e. cities, knowledge of rights of way, to own that asset or to be involved in the physical asset. And then another, talent and skill set to operate those networks, to get them going, to have that role in kickstarting them. and still another to offer services on these networks, right? And that's, I think, what we're beginning finally. And I remember, Steve, we've debated this, years past. I know we've debated this, but we're finally beginning to see a lot more attention and acceptance that open access models can unlock some of these capabilities that are not available otherwise.
Yeah, let me say, by the way, open access today is a very doable thing, where 10 or 15 years ago, it was much more difficult because most people wanted their video from their network provider because it's just plain easier. Today, they couldn't care less. Because we write the models so many people use, and because small companies know they can simply call me or email me and we'll give them an hour or two of free consulting. The big thing I hear from is well, we're a family business. We haven't taken a loan for a very long time. We're proud of pay as you go. And yeah, we've got an old copper system. We might consider upgrading it a little bit, but we really don't want to get involved with the federal government. We're on good terms with local government, da, 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 da. And I said, just go talk to people. I mean, the technology makes it a lot easier with or without government funding. If you regionalize, you could have 2, 3, 4, 5 very small operators. You regionalize, you're saving 20% on marketing and overhead just to start, even though you may have to realign your network slightly. So it might cost you a few percent, never more than 5% on anything I've looked at. To make sure all the trunks line up properly and the networks mesh. It's really not a big deal. Have you actually considered that? And then you turn around to government and say, stop taxing what you want. If you want something, don't tax it. Very, very important. Once they start talking, they realize they have a commonality. And because the regional operator, the public-private partnership or private-private partnership or public-public partnership is bigger, then they're more likely to attract and be able to negotiate properly with the national cellular carriers for backhaul, things like that. So they're more likely to be able to set up a local data center. And be a forwarding point for Netflix and other video providers and things like that. So there's more business to be had than doing it themselves, even if they've been in business for 100 years, gotten by, love the community loves them, but they just don't distribute good broadband.
Right. Drew, I want to come back to something you just mentioned. The overbuilding sin is the larger carriers are talking about. I guess that's what they think of it as. But yet at the same time, as Brian just pointed out, that there's places where there's really insufficient broadband, but there could be a map that's saying there is broadband there. I mean, how do we balance that out and kind of get through this and get this overbuilding done?
My view is that the funds being discussed and now apparently part of a deal, we're still waiting for the writing of $65 billion. There are funds to get. I won't say X percent, but it's a high percent, 90, 80%, 90%, some to get fiber to the home. We are finally at the point where we can seriously talk about getting fiber to the home for everyone. So my view, that really should be the goal. And so why give up? Why say, oh, well, yeah, this person has, somewhat decent 25/3 broadband. Let's not spend money. No, let's bite the bullet, get fiber to the home to everyone, gigabit symmetrical, upgradable to 10 gigabit symmetrical, and stop, pussyfooting around with this notion that some people are going to get it sooner than others. Well, of course, some people are going to get it sooner than others, but let's just get it to everyone as soon as we can.
Right. Hilda, I'll kick it to you and then to Brian and Steve.
Well, I think that, we do have to do that. I mean, it has been a territorial defined industry. It has the telecommunications industry has always sort of carved out their little niche, and that's where they've operated. Their regulatory body looks at it the same way. So when we talk about overbuilding or, getting into each other's backyard, there's not a good history of how to do that, or what's fair, or how do you make everybody equal in it. And it's a very big, I think, bite to take, but I think the very basic nature of telecommunications, what it really is and how it can reach everybody simultaneously with all the variable things that we run over that network, just really commands the discussion of how this industry is going to look in the future, how the existing behemoths are going to have to change or adjust, and it will not happen quickly, in my opinion, but I think it has to be on the table for discussion in order for us to play in the global economy, in order for this country to maximize the actual strength and muscle of what telecommunications is today and what it can do for everybody, down to my 97-year-old mother-in-law having her doctor's appointment over a cell phone, to what it can do from the space exploration. It's so vast and it's so powerful. And American citizens should not be denied the access to that. So change is inevitable, but it won't be easy.
That's for sure. How about you? I'll give it over to you, then to Steve, I guess.
I mean, I guess my comment on older building, I mean, at Lit, we like to think we're the Michael Jordan of competition. We're not afraid to go compete. From that standpoint, I guess it should be done, but it also should be done the right way and how the construction's handled. I mean, this needs to tie into dig once policies. This needs to tie into where we're not tearing up the community multiple times. And there's ways to do this, but everybody's got to be on the same team. And that's going to be an issue. There's certain areas right now where we already have right-of-ways that are over congested, and you can't go in there and overbuild in that sense and just continue tearing things up. And then you're cutting people's service. Things could get ugly from that scenario. That's where I think if tied together, if it's a new build from that perspective, dig once policies would work really, really well within those communities. I think from even an open access standpoint, some of the most rural areas out here, are if they just have one provider, they're going to be happy, because some of them have none, from there. And I think open access networks are going to be very potentially transformative in urban high density areas in the future. And we'll see how that evolves.
Great. Steve, I'll kick it to you, then we're going to get some final thoughts from everybody.
No, I mean, the biggest issue that underfunded local deployers have now is they see this shiny object, whether it's fiber, but certainly expanded, and they fear it because it's not their shiny object. And what I keep saying, and we've said it in the magazine before, join with these people so it's everyone's shiny object. It's a better shiny object. And don't be so, federal money is good. And the existence of some federal money to cut the risk to private investors, to whether it's hedge funds, to local banks, state funds, that sort of thing. All of that helps, and it helps far more than you think. A small amount of a little bit of extra public money in these areas that haven't been able to do it in the past, and just on the edge, there's a lot of them. And I'm hoping that grant programs that come along will be looking at that sort of thing, so you have at least as good a chance of getting the 25% grant you really, really need, rather than the 75% grant you might be entitled to. It's going to get a lot more stuff handed out quicker and built quicker, and it's good for everyone. And no more do we ever hear this, oh, gee, I mean, after the video, and once you get to 4K and 8K, what's going to keep driving bandwidth use?
We don't know.
Who knows, but it's happening. It's still happening. It's happening independent of COVID. It's just happening. Live with it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we're kind of just almost out of time. We've got like about 4 minutes left, but if everybody just wants to give some quick final thoughts, then we can kind of come in for a landing, as they say. So I guess Hilda, we'll start with you and then we'll go down the line.
Just go to bbcmag.com, look at the magazine, look at what the articles are about, look at the agenda on the summit, and make your reservation, because you really, the working together, not only the presenters and the sessions, it's all informative, but it's also talking one-on-one to, you know, to the Drews, to the Steves, to you. It's networking, and you just don't want to miss that opportunity to come together and share ideas and share stories and ask questions. So just register for the summit, September the 27th through the 30th, and do it today. And thank you, Drew, for the opportunity to be together, and I look forward to seeing you in Houston.
Awesome. And Brian, to you, and then we'll just, like I said, we'll just go through everybody quickly.
Yeah, I know, really quick, just attend the event. I think it's we're at a time right now where we can accelerate things faster than we ever have. And I think it still is continuing education, and let's tie all the right pieces together to go. The financial part that we talked about today and previewed, I think is something that everybody should look into when they're attending the event and conference as well. So no, attend, and again, we can get this done. We just got to do it the right way with the right partners.
Great. Drew, how about you? And then we'll wrap it.
Let me just let Steve offer any final words, and then I'll close out. Okay.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Well, the only thing I would say is, if you look at the magazine in the November-December issue, my column went through the economics of low Earth orbit satellites, and good solution for a couple of million households. We think Fiber Broadband Association doesn't like it. Knock that off. We then looked at RDOF, the FCC reverse auction program, and my column came with a 6,000 row spreadsheet for where every bit of money in front of, as I said, you were thinking we'll print it 30 pages, you know, no, you can just download it. And then the next issue, the March-April issue, we covered all the RDOF grants, and you know the consultants were desperate for this because they want to make sure they're in the money. They're applying for stuff that they think they might be able to get, you know, and so knowing what other people are doing is fine. In all of that, all I'm going to tell you, all I'm going to promise you is, you think that's detail? Come to the summit. There, you're really going to get detail. But that's the starting point. We're not in the platitude business.
That's for sure. And Drew?
So thank you so much, Sean, for moderating. It's actually been a pleasure to be on the other side. Normally, I'm the moderator, just to sit back and let someone else try to
chance to relax for one day. Yeah.
So I have 3 points in 60 seconds. The first point is, thank you so much to Broadband Communities. We are very, very grateful to partner with Broadband Communities on the Digital Infrastructure Investment 2021, as we did last year. And for many years, as Hilda has referred, Steve, he's not mentioned it. Probably the first time he hasn't mentioned, Steve Ross was my professor at Columbia Journalism School.
That's right.
So
that's right.
It has been a great pleasure to work with these folks over the years. Second is,
and then he became a lawyer.
We are here every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time for Broadband Breakfast Live Online. We've got a great program, which will be up on the site for next week and weeks after. In fact, 2 weeks from now, Sean will be back moderating the last of our 3 preview sessions in anticipation of Broadband Communities. So don't miss that session on August 18th. And final point is, about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, we launched the Broadband Breakfast Club. This is a special opportunity for those of you who are regulars on Broadband Breakfast Live Online. You get special benefits, including discounts on events like Broadband Communities Summit. You get the ability to attend our in-person Broadband Breakfast Club events, such as we are launching on September 8th, and you get exclusive columns and content that come from us. Most of what we produce is free and available on the website, but there are some that we are launching out to our subscribers. So we invite you to consider that. Links to all of these are on the link that you saw. And with that, on behalf of Sean Buckley, who moderated today and is the editor of Broadband Communities, Steve Ross, Hilda Legg, Brian Snyder, I'm Drew Clark with Broadband Breakfast. We'll see you next Wednesday at 12 noon. Take care.